My landlord called me just after midnight, sounding so unsteady I almost didn't recognize his voice. He whispered, "Leave right now." They located the body. I asked which body he was even mentioning, spoke three chilling words that instantly froze me inside your apartment walls. 10 minutes later, bright forensic teams in white protective suits completely surrounded the entire apartment building. That's when I realized I'd been living only a few inches away from a hidden murder. Victim for 6 months. My name is Harper Green, 28 years old. I work full-time freelance as a home-based graphic designer handling small clients. The man who phoned me that terrifying night was Mr. Vincent Chen, my 67-year-old landlord who owned the whole modest building where I stayed. He always seemed gentle, soft-spoken, polite, almost shy. My best friend Tessa, 29, works long hours as a dedicated nurse. She's been my sanity and my reasoning anchor ever since our college. Years together passed by. My younger sister, Paige, 24, studies in graduate school chasing her future. Detective Brian Cole served as the homicide investigator, guiding me through everything. The victim sealed inside my walls was Vanessa Ortiz, 22, a college student missing 18 months. If you want details about how I survived learning my home carried such a horrifying secret, comment where you're watching and tap the subscribe button because this story may make you examine every wall you have. I work from home creating logos and websites for different small businesses. 6 months before this night changed my life. I'd moved into a single-bedroom, second-floor apartment inside an older building in the city, Baltimore. My last roommate situation collapsed badly, forcing me to find somewhere quickly. This apartment was unexpectedly cheap for the neighborhood, which I assumed meant I'd simply gotten lucky. The building was ancient, constructed back in 1920s, yet it had charm: old hardwood floors, tall ceilings, heavy plaster walls. Mr. Chen owned everything, all 6 compact units, and lived downstairs himself. He managed every repair, even though his age was starting to show. I hardly saw neighbors besides Mrs. Ruth Brennan, a 73-year-old woman living on the 3rd floor for 4 decades. She knew absolutely everything about everyone living here. I loved staying alone after years constantly handling drama that comes with living alongside different roommates. My best friend Tessa thought I was becoming too isolated lately, spending entire days inside my apartment without encountering another human being at all. My sister Paige worried that I worked excessively and rarely went out to breathe or relax. But I was honestly happy with my quiet, predictable daily routine life. I'd sit at my desk working through daylight, cook dinner in my small, warm kitchen later, and watch TV nightly, curled up on my comfortable couch until sleep. Everything felt safe, steady, familiar, quiet, and mine. Mr. Chen stayed a wonderful landlord who always responded quickly when something in the apartment needed repairs or simple attention. The rent stayed reasonable. The neighborhood felt peaceful. Since Tira believed I'd gotten incredibly lucky finding a place this decent. During the 6 months I'd been living here, I did notice several odd little things happening, though. I never imagined any were truly serious. Sometimes, very late nights, I'd hear weird noises coming faintly through inside the walls around me. It sounded like scratching, creaking, or gentle shifting, as if the old building itself was settling. I assumed it was aged pipes or maybe mice hiding inside walls, which is extremely common in structures this old. There was also occasionally a strange smell drifting through my bedroom air. It came, then vanished, musty, stale, unpleasant, almost like mildew or aged, crumbling building materials nearby. I bought candles, sprays, air fresheners, everything possible, and simply lived with it, while brushing off the concern as nothing. I figured somewhere inside the thick plaster walls there might be hidden moisture causing minor mold. Around 3 months after moving into this place, I noticed a tiny hairline crack forming near the wall beside my bedroom closet one morning. At first, it was barely visible, just a thin painted line slowly stretching across the wall. I mentioned it casually to Mr. Chen one day when we crossed paths out in the hallway by the stairs. He said he'd check it soon, but looked nervous the moment I brought it up directly and quickly changed topics. I thought that behavior was strange, but decided not to press him. Over the next months, the crack grew steadily bigger, widening, gradually across the surface little by little every passing week. 2 weeks before everything truly happened, that crack had stretched nearly 4 inches long and about a quarter inch in width. I could see darkness behind it whenever I looked. Closely, like some empty hollow space existed deep inside that wall. That seemed incredibly strange because I always believed the walls were solid plaster completely through inside. I placed a picture frame carefully over that crack to hide it, making a mental note to pressure Mr. Chen later about repairing it. But I was overwhelmed with work and honestly, it didn't feel urgent, so I kept procrastinating. The night my life changed forever began unbelievably normal. Nothing unusual happening. 'Twas a Thursday during the end of October, chilly and quiet. I'd worked all day on a client's logo design project before taking a break to cook simple pasta for dinner, then spent my evening watching a Netflix show. Around 9 that night, I video called Paige discussing her stressful thesis defense. She was tense, overwhelmed, and I tried offering encouragement and helpful advice. Around 11 o'clock, I washed my face, brushed my teeth, and slowly climbed tired into bed. I'm naturally a light sleeper, so usually I drift off extremely fast whenever exhaustion really hits. That night was similar. I fell asleep around 11:30 until my phone suddenly rang exactly at midnight, jolting me awake instantly and sharply. I grabbed it quickly from my nightstand drawer and saw Mr. Chen was calling unexpectedly late. In the entire 6 months I'd lived here, he never once called, only texted regarding rent reminders or maintenance issues. A midnight phone call felt completely out of character. I answered and heard his voice sounding terribly wrong, breathless, trembling, terrified. He said my name with shaking desperation that barely sounded like him. He told me urgently I needed to leave my apartment right now without any single question. My sleepy, fogged brain asked if maybe there was a fire burning or a gas leak or something seriously wrong with the entire building. He inhaled shakily and then said something that made my blood freeze. He told me they found the body and police were coming now. I shot straight upright and asked which body he was even referencing. There was a long, terrible, silent pause before he whispered that police had found a body inside one of my walls and that I needed to leave immediately. Then he hung up before I could speak or ask another question. I sat completely frozen in my dark bedroom holding my phone while trying to understand whether that call truly happened or if I was still dreaming in panic. I stared around slowly at familiar bedroom shadows, everything looking completely normal. Yet my heart pounded and my hands trembled. I turned on every light across my apartment and stood in the center of my living room trying to decide what I should do. I called Mr. Chen again immediately, but his phone went directly to voicemail with no explanation. I tried 2 more times with the same silence, staring back again. Suddenly, I looked at my walls differently, strange, threatening, ominous instead of comforting. I walked into my bedroom and stared directly at the crack hidden behind that picture frame. I slowly removed it and examined the crack far more closely than I ever had before. It was around 4 inches long now and wide enough to show darkness lingering deep behind, but nothing else visible. A wave of nausea hit me instantly hard. What exactly did he mean? There was a body sealed in there? How could that even be possible? At all. The walls were thick, solid plaster, old-fashioned construction. How could anything exist hidden inside those walls? I grabbed my phone and called Tessa, even though it was already past midnight and late. She answered on the 4th tired ring, sounding annoyed and half asleep initially. I told her everything about Mr. Chen's phone call, and she immediately snapped, fully awake, concerned. She said I needed to call the police right now myself instead of waiting around hoping they showed up eventually. I dialed 911 with shaking, terrified, weak hands. When the dispatcher responded, I tried explaining everything, but I knew. It sounded unbelievably insane altogether. I told her my landlord had called saying police were already coming because a body had been found inside walls of my very apartment. The dispatcher went quiet for several 10 seconds while I heard typing. Then she asked calmly for my exact address. After giving it, she confirmed units were already on their way there. She instructed me firmly to exit the building immediately and wait outside for the officers arriving. She said not to touch anything inside and to stay on with her until they arrived. That's when it finally hit me entirely that this situation was real. Not a misunderstanding, joke, or bizarre late-night prank. Something horrific had been discovered inside my home, and I'd unknowingly lived beside it for months. I grabbed my jeans and pulled them quickly over my pajama pants. I threw on a sweatshirt and shoved feet into sneakers without tying. I grabbed my phone, my purse, my keys, and hurried out quickly from my small apartment. The hallway was dark, silent, cold, completely still. I went downstairs immediately to the first floor, knocking loudly on Mr. Chen's door several times. I could see faint light glowing beneath it, but he never answered, no matter how loudly or desperately I knocked. I called his name, begging him to explain what exactly was happening. Nothing responded. Only silence. I finally gave up and stepped outside toward the front of the building into the cold October night air, shivering. I hadn't grabbed any jackets, so I hugged myself tightly while staring at my building strangely like I'd never seen it before in life. Within barely 3 minutes, I saw flashing lights approaching fast down the street toward the building. 2 police cars pulled up quickly, followed by an unmarked police sedan. Officers stepped out immediately and walked straight toward me, asking if I was Harper Green from apartment 2, C, quietly trembling. I said yes, and they asked me firmly to move farther away from the building itself. More police cars kept arriving, one after another. A man in plain clothes stepped slowly out of the unmarked vehicle and moved directly toward me with steady purpose. He raised a badge my way and calmly introduced himself as Detective Brian Cole with Homicide Division Authority backing him. Homicide. That single word made everything suddenly heavier, sharper, darker, painfully real. Detective Cole then asked me to explain everything I truly knew firsthand. I told him about the midnight call from Mr. Chen, every detail about what he'd whispered, about the widening crack inside my bedroom wall tonight. Cole's expression turned grim, focused, serious, unwaveringly intense. He asked how long I'd been living here. 6 months, I told him without hesitation or confusion clouding my voice. He asked if I'd noticed anything strange happening during all that time. I mentioned the odd odor drifting in randomly, the faint scratching noises inside the walls nightly, the long crack growing slowly wider every week. He wrote everything down with quick, deliberate strokes. Then he asked whether I'd ever met the previous tenant or if Mr. Chen mentioned anyone else living there before. I said no immediately. Mr. Chen told me the apartment stayed empty over a year before I finally moved in, and that he'd renovated the place during downtime then. Detective Cole nodded slowly, like that detail mattered in a very important way he wasn't revealing. More vehicles kept showing, including a large white van that rumbled loudly. People in protective suits stepped out and started unloading boxes of equipment. Detective Cole explained they'd received an anonymous call earlier that same evening about possible human remains hidden somewhere in this building's walls or structure. They'd secured an emergency search warrant immediately, and Mr. Chen had allowed them inside to investigate. Using advanced thermal imaging tools, they'd detected something that resembled human remains deep in a wall cavity inside my bedroom. Detective Cole said they needed quick access to my apartment to confirm what they believed they'd found and start processing what now constituted an active and official crime. Scene requiring strict protocol. He asked if I had anywhere safe I could stay for tonight because returning inside wasn't allowed for several hours. maybe even multiple days. I stood outside, freezing on the sidewalk, trying to process everything he was calmly explaining now. There were human remains in my bedroom wall. I had slept there for 6 entire months. I had lived inches away from a dead person sealed behind plaster. My stomach twisted violently, like I might vomit or faint or collapse. I called Tessa back with trembling, unsteady hands, asking if I could stay with her tonight, even though it was already far past midnight. She said yes instantly and asked if I needed her to come pick me up immediately. I said no quietly. I had my car. I just needed distance from this building fast. Detective Cole said he'd need further conversation tomorrow, but I should leave now, go somewhere safe, and attempt getting rest. Rest felt completely impossible, but I nodded anyway. Before I could go, Mrs. Brennan from the 3rd floor came outside wrapped in her bathrobe with gray hair curlers. She demanded to know why police filled her building at this hour. I didn't know what to say at all, but Detective Cole stepped forward and calmly explained human remains were discovered inside the building walls and they were investigating. Mrs. Brennan went pale. She grabbed my arm and said something that made everyone abruptly freeze. She said that around 18 months earlier, there had been a young woman living in my apartment. Unit number 2C. Her name was Vanessa, a quiet, sweet college student who kept peaceful. Mrs. Brennan said Vanessa had been dating Marcus, Mr. Chen's nephew, visiting the building constantly before. Then one random day, Vanessa simply disappeared entirely. Mr. Chen told everyone she'd broken her lease and moved out fast without any proper notice. But Mrs. Brennan thought it strange because Vanessa left all her belongings and furniture behind, untouched, and never came back. Detective Cole's entire demeanor shifted instantly, becoming sharper. He pulled out his phone and made several urgent calls right there outside on the sidewalk. He asked Mrs. Brennan to stay and provide a formal, detailed statement to officers waiting nearby. He asked me whether Mr. Chen ever mentioned this former tenant or his nephew at all. I said absolutely not. He told me earlier the apartment had remained vacant for over 1 full year before renting. Detective Cole walked over to Mr. Chen's door with 2 other officers. They knocked loudly on the door and announced they needed to speak with Vincent Chen immediately now and insisted that he must open it right away without delay whatsoever. After roughly 30 seconds, the door slowly creaked open, revealing Mr. Chen looking like he'd aged a full decade already within the past hour. His face appeared pale and his eyes red like he had been crying constantly throughout. Officers instructed him firmly to step outside immediately. He came out cautiously while Detective Cole began questioning him directly there, right in front building. I could hear fragments of the conversation clearly. He kept nervously repeating that he didn't know what to do about this and that his nephew Marcus had called him panicked desperately. Detective Cole asked him directly if he had helped conceal a body somewhere. Inside the building's walls recently, Mr. Chen started sobbing and nodding repeatedly, admitting truth. He explained that Marcus had called 18 months earlier, saying a terrible accident occurred. Vanessa was dead. Marcus begged his uncle to hide everything carefully. Mr. Chen said they had placed her body inside an old cavity from original construction of the walls, then sealed it with fresh drywall and paint over the top. He said he thought about it every single day without ever forgetting anything. He kept the apartment empty for 1 full year because he couldn't bear someone living there afterwards. But then financial problems emerged and he rented anyway. He said he convinced himself nobody would ever discover truth. I listened, completely stunned by this horrifying confession. Mr. Chen had seemed like such a kind, gentle old man initially, so trustworthy. He had been so helpful and so nice too. Me when I moved in originally, fixing small repairs and answering every question patiently. And all the while he knew a dead woman was hidden inside my bedroom wall silently. He'd allowed me to live there, sleeping inches away from her remains. Detective Cole arrested him immediately, handcuffing him while reading rights loudly. Mr. Chen didn't resist. He just continued crying and apologizing quietly to nobody in particular. I got into my car slowly and drove to Tessa's apartment completely shaken. I barely remembered driving, even though it took only 15 minutes down familiar streets. When I arrived, Tessa was waking up gently, looking tired but concerned carefully. She made me tea and wrapped me in a blanket on her couch quietly, without questions. She just sat with me silently, comforting. Around 3 in the morning, Detective Cole called my phone with updates quickly. He said forensic investigators confirmed remains were human, young female, and preliminary dental records suggested her identity. The victim was Vanessa Ortiz, 22-year-old nursing student reported missing 18 months ago by her family desperately searching. Her case had gone cold months before with absolutely no leads at all until tonight. Cole said my apartment was now officially an active crime scene, and I couldn't return for at least several days while they processed everything carefully. He also warned me about media attention once story broke because discoveries like this always made national news. I thanked him and hung up, trying to absorb everything I'd learned. I looked at Tessa and said I could never go back to that apartment ever. She said I didn't have to. I could stay with her indefinitely if needed for safety. I barely slept that night fully, and when I did, nightmares haunted me about walls closing in and smells I couldn't escape from anywhere. By the next morning, the story was everywhere, online and on every news channel covering the discovery. Asterisk. Every local news station shared the same headline loudly across screens. Body found hidden inside Baltimore apartment wall, 18 months. My building stood completely surrounded by reporters and multiple news vans lining the busy sidewalk. Journalists recorded live broadcasts while I tried to ignore them entirely. My phone rang non-stop with calls from journalists demanding interviews and comments. I ignored every single one of them patiently. I couldn't speak about it, barely even think about it without feeling completely sick inside. Paige arrived at Tessa's apartment that afternoon looking frightened for me. My parents called from Florida, where they had retired recently, saying they were booking flights to come help me. I told them not to come, saying I was fine outwardly, even though clearly I wasn't fine at all. I couldn't eat anything without feeling waves of nausea. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured that crack in the wall and imagined what had been hidden behind it all those long months. Tessa ended up taking several days off work just to stay with me because I wasn't functioning well enough to be completely alone safely. Over the next few days, Detective Cole kept calling frequently with updates and reassurance. I think he understood that I needed information to process everything I'd been living with silently. He told me Vanessa Ortiz had been a nursing student at the local community college with dreams of becoming a pediatric nurse someday. She had been dating Marcus Chen for approximately 4 months before her death. Neighbors from the building reported hearing them fight often and very loudly. The night Vanessa died, multiple residents heard screaming and crashing noises coming from Unit to C around 10 at night. Then everything went completely silent suddenly. Marcus had called his uncle, panicked, around 11 that night. Mr. Chen's phone records confirmed this. Marcus claimed Vanessa attacked him during argument, and he pushed her away in self-defense. She fell and hit her head on table corner, causing fatal injury. He said it was an accident, but he panicked heavily. Instead of contacting 911, he had called his uncle immediately for help. Together, they hid her body inside a wall cavity sealed. It would drywall and painted over everything completely. Mr. Chen reported to other tenants falsely that Vanessa had broken her lease and moved out. Vanessa's family reported her missing. Police investigated, found nothing, and the case went cold quickly. A week after the discovery, I received a phone call from unknown number. I almost didn't answer the call, but curiosity made me pick it up eventually. A woman introduced herself as Carmen Ortiz, Vanessa's mother, calling cautiously. She said Detective Cole had given her my number and she wanted to speak with me if willing. My first instinct was to refuse because I didn't know what to say. to her, but I agreed to meet at a coffee shop near Tessa's apartment safely. Carmen was a woman in her 50s with the same dark eyes and hair that Vanessa had in the photos I had seen recently. She thanked me for meeting and said she knew this had been difficult for me too. She explained she spent 18 long months unsure whether her daughter was alive, dead, kidnapped, or held somewhere unknown. Finding out Vanessa was dead was the worst news she had ever received in her life. At least now she had answers finally, allowing her to bury her daughter properly and say goodbye. Carmen said she didn't blame me for anything at all because I had been a victim too differently. She asked me to describe the apartment, Vanessa's last space, and surroundings. I described everything honestly, omitting smells and sounds now understood as decomposition indicators. After meeting Carmen, I knew absolutely I could never return to that apartment ever again. Detective Cole called a few days later, saying, "Forensic team had finished processing the scene." He told me I could finally retrieve my belongings safely. I asked Tessa and Paige to come with me immediately because I couldn't face it alone tonight. Walking back into that building felt so unreal and completely wrong entirely. Yellow crime scene tape still stretched across my doorway firmly. Inside, my apartment looked violated and disturbed. Everything was covered in black fingerprint powder everywhere. My bedroom wall had been entirely torn open suddenly, revealing the cavity where Vanessa's body had been hidden securely. I could see the old construction behind the plaster clearly. The space had existed since building was originally built in the 1920s. I grabbed my clothes, laptop, and some personal items, telling my sisters I was ready to leave immediately. I never wanted to see that place ever again. I called Mr. Chen's daughter, now managing the building, and told her I was breaking my lease effective immediately and wouldn't be returning under any circumstances. She said she completely understood and that I wouldn't owe any remaining rent and would receive full security deposit back promptly. Her father's actions had destroyed lives, and she was horrified by what he had done. Marcus Chen was arrested in California, where he'd been living under mother's maiden name secretly. He was extradited back to Maryland to face multiple charges of second-degree murder plus other serious felonies pending. Marcus Chen's trial began 11 months after Vanessa's body was discovered finally. I was called as a witness, even though I didn't have much to offer beyond testimony regarding apartment condition and growing crack in wall that had caused everything to unravel tragically. The prosecution built their case on forensic evidence collected by detectives and investigators carefully. Mr. Chen's detailed confession about helping conceal the body plus neighbor testimony describing violent fight heard the night Vanessa died provided additional proof beyond doubt. Marcus took the stand and claimed it had been a tragic accident, that Vanessa attacked him first during an argument and he pushed her only in self-defense. The medical examiner's testimony destroyed his defense completely. She explained Vanessa's skull fractures and injuries were entirely inconsistent with a simple fall. She'd been struck multiple times violently with significant force. The jury deliberated just under 2 days before returning a guilty verdict on all counts. Marcus Chen was sentenced to 30 years to life without parole immediately. He showed no emotion as sentence was read aloud. Vincent Chen, who helped conceal crime, received 12 years for being accessory to murder and obstruction of justice. During his sentencing hearing, he read a statement apologizing to the Ortiz family. Sincerely, he said he had made worst decision ever helping his nephew instead of calling police immediately. He said he thought about Vanessa every single day and would carry guilt for life. He sold apartment building to cover legal fees and pay restitution to Vanessa's family properly. The building became locally infamous after the story broke. New owners tried renovating and renting units, but nobody wanted to live where murder had been hidden 18 months. Eventually, it was sold again to developers planning to demolish completely and build new condos in place. When I heard that news, I felt nothing but relief and closure. That building deserved to be erased entirely from history. Before demolition happened, Carmen contacted me asking to visit Vanessa's apartment one final time together. I hesitated but said yes anyway because it felt like the right thing to do. We stood together in an empty unit with wall cavity exposed where her daughter had been hidden all that time. Carmen said a prayer in Spanish and cried softly. I cried with her too. She thanked me for helping bring Vanessa home to her family finally. It was one of the hardest moments of my life, standing in that violated space silently. It took me a long time to feel normal again. I stayed with Tessa for 3 weeks straight while searching for a new apartment quietly. I couldn't bear to enter any older buildings again. Eventually, I found a modern apartment complex built 5 years ago safely. It was more expensive, but I needed absolute security. Paige and Tessa helped me move in and arrange everything perfectly. Yet, even in new apartment, I struggled checking walls obsessively, tapping them for hidden spaces or secrets. I started having panic attacks frequently when alone indoors. Tessa finally convinced me to see a trauma therapist for weeks regularly. Months of therapy helped me sleep through nights without nightmares. Finally, therapist explained I was experiencing PTSD from safe space violation combined with horror discovery I endured. She said healing would take time but was possible. A year after Vanessa's body was found, Carmen organized a memorial service on anniversary of her death. She asked if I would attend and speak briefly. I was terrified but agreed anyway. It's a service. Surrounded by Vanessa's loved ones, I spoke about haunting apartment and trusting instincts. I talked about never forgetting victims of violence properly. After service, Vanessa's younger brother hugged me, thanking me for being present, said family could heal finally knowing truth, and I had helped begin closure process. Carmen and I have stayed connected ever since then. She sends card every year commemorating Discovery Anniversary, calling it Vanessa Came Home Day. I attended every memorial service without fail. I'm 30 years old now. 2 years after midnight, phone call changed everything permanently. I still live in modern apartment with documented history and solid thin walls. I still check walls, occasionally but less obsessively now. Therapy helped me manage anxiety, intrusive thoughts, and panic. I still work as freelance graphic designer, but now I maintain social life. Leaving apartment regularly to stay connected with friends and family safely. Tessa jokes that this experience actually made me more social. Probably true. Paige graduated, and we are closer than ever before.
All right.
Trauma reveals your real support system clearly. After story became public, people reached out sharing similar experiences painfully. They'd lived near crime scenes secretly, discovering hidden horrors. A specific violation exists when safe space is corrupted by knowledge impossible to unknow. I started online support group for people experiencing this trauma together. We help each other process complicated feelings safely. Living through this taught me evil hides behind ordinary faces, ordinary places. Mr. Chen seemed harmless, kind, old man, but he helped conceal murder 18 months knowingly. He rented apartment to me anyway, knowing what waited inside walls silently. I learned instincts often notice danger before mind comprehends. Those smells, sounds, persistent, uneasy feelings, all real warning signs ignored previously. I learned surviving knowledge you cannot unknow is possible. For months, I wished ignorance back, but now understand Vanessa deserved discovery. Her family deserved truth, finally. I think of Vanessa often, more than I probably should. I never met her, but feel permanently connected emotionally. I lived in her space, walked floors, existed where her life ended. Carmen says, I was last close to Vanessa. In horrible ways, she was right. Watching this and sensed wrong in your home, trust that feeling. Investigate it immediately. Ask questions when instincts signal danger. Trauma related to living. Space, you are not alone. Your feelings are completely valid. hit subscribe button and comment location. Story helps one person trust their instincts, feel less alone, then maybe good came from worst experience of my life. Remember, walls have? Histories and buildings hold secrets always.